I know what the title is and I understand why you're mad. I love this game as well. I mean, I adore Minecraft Alpha, but I even love the up-to-date 2020 version of the game, which you'll understand why I'm saying that in a minute if you actually decide to hear me out. But I understand if you don't want to. But speaking of what the title is, you'll notice it's in the present tense. I mean, most titles are, but let me feel clever. I don't mean to flex, but I've been playing Minecraft longer than you have. Bitch. The first version of the game I played was Alpha 1.1, and this came out in September of 2010. The first update I remember it getting was the Halloween update of that year, which added, among other things, the Nether, clocks, and fish, but not fishing rods. Those were already in the game, they were just useless up until now, which just makes me picture a society of idiot humans who have been trying to fish for years, despite the fact that there's literally no such thing as a fish, and then the fish just will themselves into existence to save humanity the embarrassment. At this point in history, the game was a bare bones version of what we know it to be today, with most of the features that you might recognize it for being totally absent. There were no villages or villagers, there was no end or ender dragon or endermen, no tameable mobs, no creative mode, no beds, no console commands, no biomes to speak of, and pigs had no noses. How does it smell? It smells of cum. Have you fucked this pig? I could go on for ages. Frankly, it would be easier to list features that were in the game by this point than to list all of the features that weren't. The only features that we really did have were the basic survival mechanics that the rest of the game is built around, but even those weren't the same as the systems we now have. They were precursor versions of those systems. I love Minecraft Alpha, and used to think that the only reason I preferred it to newer versions of the game is because I have nostalgia for it. But having put some critical thought into it recently, I think it might actually be better in, a lot of ways. And when I say better, I mean better for playing simple survival, because without mods, that's really the only thing you could do with it at the time. So don't get me wrong, I love a lot of the features that have been added to the game over the years, and I think a lot of them are strictly improvements. The game is absolutely a lot more polished than it used to be, and yeah, I'll get into that. However, a few of the additions and a few of the changes have fundamentally changed the core of the game, how it's played, and how the player interacts with its mechanics. While it's great that there's so much you can do in the game now that you didn't used to be able to do back in the days of Alpha, I think overall the quality has suffered since I used to play back in 2010. I know what you're wondering, by the way, and yes, I did make Minecraft videos back then.
Hi, I'm Stickman3000 and this is Epic Minecraft. That skin that you see there is my skin. I invented it. It's available on the Skindex. Today we're going to have stuff that I've made, a mob trap, lava stuff, cactus farm. These photos are way too really quick, and the rest of my world.
So, there's that. By the way, I did eventually move on from doing entirely static slideshows.
Oh, a bone. I'm going to throw it in the air. Whee! Did I pick that? Yeah, I did pick that up again.
By the way, if you end up enjoying this video, please do like and subscribe. You know me, you know I wouldn't normally ask, but I just felt like throwing myself a bone. Pun! So, in what ways does Alpha manage to be better than the current versions of Minecraft? Part 1. Food and health. When playing Minecraft today, you have a hunger bar. Your hunger will go down gradually over time, and will go down quicker if your character does physical exercise, which, like many of the people watching, because this is a video about video games, is my one true weakness. When your hunger bar is close to full, your health will regenerate over time, but once your hunger bar is empty, you'll be penalized. This is a staple mechanic of the genre. You won't find many survival games without a system something like this. But for Minecraft, this wasn't always the way. When I started playing, there was food in the game, but there was no hunger bar. Instead, food was just a source of instant healing. There was absolutely no form of natural health regeneration. Eating food was your only way to regain health. At the time, food also wasn't a stackable resource. One piece of food would take up one whole slot in your inventory. This placed a big constraint on the player, really limiting the amount of food that they could take with them anywhere they went. Inventory space is a serious thing to consider in this game, and food used to take up a lot of it. Do you want 9 heals on your expedition? Okay, that'll be a quarter of your inventory, please. Today, this is different. You can stack food as much as you can stack any other resource. One slot of your inventory can hold 64 items of food. This change was probably made to accommodate for the fact that the player is now going to have to eat more. Previously, if you didn't take any damage, you didn't need to eat anything. Now, it doesn't matter how much damage you take, you have to eat as a passive activity to keep your hunger bar up. Another change made to facilitate the new hunger system is that food was made much more abundant, as loads of new ways to get it were added. Now, for example, pretty much all animals animals will drop some kind of meat upon their death. It used to only be pigs that did that. This change does suit the addition of the hunger system, but I don't think the hunger system or any of the changes made to facilitate it suit Minecraft. Most survival games I've played that have a hunger system like the one in Minecraft don't expect the player to engage in combat as often, or even at all. The difficulty in those games doesn't come from fighting off enemies, it comes from resource management, or from the game breaking and sending all the resources you need hurtling into the fucking sky, but most often from resource management. And while Minecraft does have a big resource management element to it, the part of the game that actually challenges the player is the hostile mobs. These provide the main challenge that the player has to deal with, either by taking them on or figuring out ways to avoid them cleverly. With the original system where food just healed you, your health was such a valuable resource. Whenever you left your safe and comfortable home, your health would be limited by how much food you'd brought with you. You might have 10 hearts in your health bar, and then 20 hearts in your inventory as food, and that would be it. When it's gone, and you can't heal anymore. You're stuck with whatever health you have left. Or you're dead. While you're probably going to take some damage at some point, you really need to be careful not to take more than you have to. Taking damage was not an insignificant problem. Your health bar was something you really needed to keep an eye on. You also want to be careful when you use your heals. You don't want to stay with your health too low, but you also don't want to waste healing by using it when you've taken less damage than the amount of health it's going to restore. While it was possible to find health when you were out and about, this wasn't something you could rely on because pigs weren't something you could reliably find, and fishing required you to actually be safe while you did it. Although I do think the balance of resources was better before fishing was even added. And without that, the only reliable way to get food is by farming it, and obviously you can't take your farm with you when you leave your home. This isn't an insane limit on your heals, but it is a significant one, and it encourages the playstyle we've already talked about. This system encourages skill and care and thought being put into the way you play. The new system encourages you to have food with you. Since you're expected to just eat all the time as a passive activity, you're expected to have enough food with you to do that. And as you're doing that, you're healing anyway. It used to be that taking any damage was a problem because you had to expend a resource to get that health back. Now you can take damage as much as you want, really, so long as it doesn't fully kill you. The only limitation food places upon the player now is the amount of time they can spend doing what they're doing before they have to take a break from doing it to go and gather some more food. It's really more busy work than anything else. And while other games will implement systems like this because resource management is their main avenue for challenging the player, ironically in Minecraft this makes resource management much less of a challenge. On the rare occasions that food does become a problem, food is so overabundant that it's not a problem. Managing your food as an important resource used to be much more of a compelling challenge before this system was implemented. Part 2. Please kill me better. There are a few things so closely linked to Minecraft that you can't help think about them when you hear about it. Like creepers, diamond pickaxes, or putang. One such thing is the idea of surviving your first night, or just surviving the night in general. Days in Minecraft are quite tranquil and peaceful, but as soon as the sun goes down, monsters that want to kill you come out. This is the thing that makes survival an actual challenge in the game. Without hostile mobs running around, all it takes to stay alive is to eat food occasionally and not fall off stuff. Minecraft doesn't have any more of those nifty survival mechanics like thirst or warmth or sanity, although they would all make for interesting additions to the game. It's enemies that make the game challenging. Let's say you get caught completely unprepared outside at night. You have no weapons and no armor, and this is where all the enemies are, so it should be a death sentence, right? Well, when you were playing Alpha, unless you were really very good at the game, it was. Basically, the only thing you could do was dig yourself a hole and hide in it until morning. Originally, getting caught out like this was essentially the game's lose condition, or I guess die, lose your stuff and respawn condition, because it's absolutely not something you're supposed to do. Maybe you could survive a quick trip, but stay out there too long and you're absolutely toast. The game, particularly the early game before you had any kind of good equipment, was about avoiding that situation, not dealing with it. Taking on a single enemy wouldn't be much of a challenge, unless it was a fucking skeleton, but the problem was there were lots of them. And if you found yourself in the place that you'll come from, you'd be relatively quickly overrun and killed. But as time has gone on, changes to various mechanics have made this situation much easier to survive. First of all, changes have been made to the ways that enemies behave. Here's some footage of me getting fucking outplayed by a spider. You can see here that me misjudging the range of my attack and missing one swing lets the spider get a jump on me and nearly fucking kill me by pushing me down a cave. The cave was just bad luck, but the spider actually managing to get a hit through wasn't that rare. You could see it several times in that clip. Now, compare the Chad Minecraft Alpha spider to the Virgin 2020 spider. It's just not as hard to kill. kill. Even when you're completely unarmed and have to very slowly punch it to death half a heart at a time, it's gonna struggle to get any hits through on you. Even when you're within range of its attacks, you'll find yourself hit by it less frequently. Look how close it gets here without me taking any damage. It's a fucking pacifist. You never used to get away with that shit. A more significant change you'll notice to the spider's behavior is that when you get a hit on it, it really slows it down. When the Chad Alpha Spider got hit, it would get knocked back, but then it would be back at top speed chasing you instantly. When you punch the Virgin 2020 spider, it goes, wait, what was I doing? Oh right, I was attacking this guy. Even when it doesn't take a full-on break after a hit, it does slow down and then have to reach top speed again. This means that the reaction time required to land your hits is much lower. These changes might seem like very small ones. That's because they are. But the combined effect of different changes like this made to not just spiders makes enemies a lot easier to deal with. But that's nothing compared to the pure cheesing potential of sprinting. In Surviving the Night, it barely matters how easy the enemies are to kill when you don't have to deal with them at all. On screen now is footage of me surviving an entire night by holding sprint, forward, and jump, making basically no effort to avoid areas where enemies are, and actually later on as I got bored, I went near enemies deliberately and still didn't die. Fuck, I hardly took any damage through the whole thing, and most of the damage I did take was fall damage when I jumped off a ledge that was too big. I did have a couple skeletons get some cheeky shots off on me though, but hey, that damage hardly mattered anyway because I didn't have to expend a resource to get that health back. But in a survival game, the main thing that you have to survive should be harder to survive than this. Look at me go! Whee! Look at me go wee. Sprinting was added relatively late in the game's development, far later than the enemies were, and as a result the enemies are really well balanced for a player that can't sprint. When sprinting was added, the speed of various enemies should have been rebalanced to account for the fact. Tweaking them to have a higher aggro range would also help fit this change. Friendly reminder that it would be completely reasonable for it to be near impossible to survive a night outside with no equipment, because that's a situation the game expects you to avoid. But now the main antagonistic force that the player has to survive can be easily cheesed with one of the game's core mechanics. And this isn't some secret cheesing trick the player has to learn. Just running away is the most simple and obvious tactic for basically any survival game when you can't deal with a threat. This is something the player will quickly learn they can do, and it will make the prospect of going out at night almost entirely unthreatening. Certainly compared to what it used to be like. Surviving the night is not a challenge. But hey, good news, you don't even have to survive it. Part 3. Beds are the most OP item in the game. As soon as you find 3 sheep in Minecraft, you can basically completely circumvent the game's main challenge. Lots of survival games offer beds that give the player the option to skip the night as relatively early game items. In Minecraft, this is no different. Beds are incredibly easy to acquire. However, something that is different about Minecraft is that the main source of difficulty, the main thing the player has to survive, is tied directly to how dark it is. The most significant spawn condition for hostile mobs is the light level. If the light level is low, mobs, like the Virgin Spider, will spawn. I'm gonna kill you! I'm gonna kill you! I'm gonna kill you! On top of that, of the 4 most common enemies, zombies and skeletons burn in the daylight and spiders won't attack you in the light. Therefore, the ability to banish darkness from most of your world is a power that's equivalent to an endgame item. In Minecraft Alpha, night took up half of all of your in-game time, and that was just it. Nothing you could do about it. Half of the time, going outside would be dangerous. This would provide the player with a much greater incentive to interact with the game's building mechanics. In Alpha, the dangerous night was an unavoidable part of the experience. So it was up to the player to take control of the world and make sure that they could do as much during the night as they possibly could. Building a fortified area around your base that enemies can't possibly get in is fun in the current game, but only a few personally are self-motivated to do that kind of thing. In the Alpha, the game motivated you to do that. It was useful. In Alpha, it's great to have that fortified area because you can use it to enclose your farms, your trees. You can even work on the outside of your base at night. Whatever you were doing in your world, there'd be an incentive to take control and give yourself the ability to do it at night. When half of the time inside is the only safe place to be, this motivates the player to make inside nice, and to expand on it as much as they can, to progress from the early game where they're spending their nights cooped up inside a small shelter, to the late game where they can spend the night in the huge area of safety they've created, be it a mansion, castle, fortress, underground network of tunnels, entirely illuminated island, or whatever other creative solution that you could come up with to best rise up to the challenges presented to you by the world. Now, while there's no reason you can't do these things if you choose to, there's no reason to choose to. Now, having one bed is just as effective as having an entire fortress used to be. In fact, if you take into account certain additions, such as phantoms that attack the player if they've not slept for too long, sleeping is a more effective strategy than building a fortress. Oh, look at those guys, they're really trying to kill me, huh? Oh, fuck. That was acting. I'm really good at it. Yeah, base building is still fun in 2020, and it's in fact complemented by the game's improved and more polished building mechanics. But if you just want to build for the sake of building, then creative mode would be your best option, as survival no longer presents much more of an incentive to build than creative does. And building for the sake of building is pretty much the only reason to build anything beyond a room with a bed in it now. This is a real shame. It completely changes how a player is going to instinctively react to the mechanics they're presented with. It removes a huge, if not the largest, survival aspect of the game. Friendly reminder that the game mode is called Survival, so I don't feel like I'm barking up the wrong tree looking for something that's not supposed to be there. And by removing the challenge, you remove the fun that the player will have overcoming it. But there is another significant area in the overworld we haven't talked about yet. Part 4. Caves. Except for the duration of this part, I'm going to call caves holes, because I'm 12. I feel it's at least important to touch on holes. One thing you're expected to do to progress in Minecraft is to go inside holes. Whether you search for entrances to holes on the surface or dig deep to see if you can't penetrate a hole that way, making your way inside a hole is an important part of progression in the game. Holes, particularly deep holes, are where you're going to find all the minerals you need to make better equipment. And I do feel holes are important to touch on because a lot of my criticisms of more modern versions of the game don't really apply to what you're going to be doing inside holes. Hole exploration isn't affected by beds, for example, because skipping the night doesn't matter when you're underground because it's dark there anyway. And while sprinting may be a great way to cheese the night, underground you're not going to have many places to sprint to. Being in an enclosed space that's always dark actually forces the player to take on some of the challenges that the game provides. Although when exploring holes, I do think the game still suffers for its weaker enemies and revised hunger system. Taking damage is still nowhere as much of an issue as it used to be when you're expected to eat passively and thereby regain health passively regardless of whether or not you've actually taken any damage. And since holes have always been the place where food is most limited, exploring holes used to be a lot more tense and engaging than it is now. For that reason, hole exploration does suffer in newer versions of the game, but not as much as other elements of the experience do. There's also the matter of hole generation. Holes in Alpha generated very differently to how they generate today. There was only really one type of hole, your basic hole, but there was quite a lot of variation to it in width, length, wiggliness, and how much they'd intersect to create a network of holes, or big cavern. Comparatively, in modern versions of the game, you've got three main types of significant hole. You've still got your basic hole, that's not gone anywhere, but now you've also got mine shafts and ravines. Basic holes, for reasons I don't quite understand, don't have as much variation to them anymore. They are very samey now. They're all about the same width, won't go in surprising directions, and very rarely intersect a lot to give you those cool caverns I was talking about. Ravines share a similar lack of variation. Once you've seen one ravine, you've seen every ravine ever. These two types of hole are just very basic presets that you'll see over and over again. Mine shafts are much more varied, but they are still constructed from these presets, just lots more of them. Although still not that many, considering how long they've had to develop Minecraft and how long the player is expected to spend underground. You've got your basic hallway, spider-infested hallway, junction with 4 pillars in it, tall junction with 4 pillars in it, staircase, which is never any shorter or taller than this, wooden bridge where the mineshaft intersects with a different type of hole, and square room with dirt floor. Congratulations, you've now seen basically every Minecraft cave ever, just excluding a couple of other repeating presets I haven't named yet, like, who could forget such varied masterpieces as completely closed off small cavern with water in the bottom of it, or completely closed off small cavern with lava in the bottom of it. While I would say that the new hole generation is overall an improvement, it lacks the more fluid and natural variation that the original had. This is actually an issue I feel plagues Minecraft's world generation as a whole now, but I think that's something that deserves its own dedicated video. I promise to try and make it interesting. So while the whole exploration element of the game, which is a significant element, isn't plagued by a few of the issues I've brought up in this video so far, it is plagued by the environments being very monotonous and repetitive considering the amount of time the player is expected to spend in them. I mean, just by watching this video, you've basically seen everything that Minecraft whole exploration has to offer except the loot, and the occasional small mossy room with a tiny spinning on-fire zombie in a cage in it. It's incredibly limited to the extent that a cave update is one of the most frequently requested things by fans, myself included. But before I recommend you just go play Minecraft Alpha and my conclusion, which I will, it would be amiss of me not to mention Part 5. polish. Minecraft Alpha, as you would expect from an alpha game, lacks polish. Like, oh boy, there is not an animation for day to night. It just gets darker in very obvious increments. Hey, you know how when you cut down a tree, all the leaves disappear so that you don't have to delete all the leaves by hand? Yeah, nope, that wasn't added yet. Have fun destroying all the leaves yourself. Or just surrender to the idea that your world is going to look really ugly with loads of abandoned treetops everywhere, or burn the treetops and then accidentally burn down the entire forest. Hey, remember doing that, veteran Minecraft players? I bet you'd forgotten about that. I had until I went back to Alpha again. Man, if you think that not being able to place slabs vertically is a limitation, wait till you see what you can't do with them in this version of the game. But hey, I mean, the current version of Minecraft still has its issues, right? Please just fix this shit. The water lakes generate after the trees, so will result in floating trees and also floating grass. This is such an easy thing to fix, and it's been a problem in the game forever. I did just think it was worth warning you before we get into the next bit. Yeah, Minecraft Alpha, not the most polished thing in the world, although considering that it's an alpha, that's fairly reasonable. But, part 6. Conclusions. Minecraft is not a good survival game. It used to be, but then they changed loads of things about it, and now it isn't anymore. That doesn't mean that the game doesn't have countless other strengths, like its creative mode and the mini-games that you can create with it, and I could go on for like a while, but the main survival game mode is not good at being a survival game, as many of the mechanics are antithetical to providing an engaging survival experience. Loads of the features that they've added in the last 10 years have been great. I think foxes are really cute, and I love them. But the very core of the game that all these different features are built on top of has really suffered. The modern game, even the modern survival mode, is good at doing a lot of things. It's just not good at being a survival game. If you've never played Minecraft Alpha, or maybe did play it when it first came out, but never thought about how fundamentally different it was then to how it is now and have never gone back to it, I totally recommend giving it a go. Although do bear in mind that it's only good for playing survival. It's not a substitute for everything that the game can do today. It's really easy to do. The Minecraft launcher in its current state allows you to go back and play past versions of the game. So if you found what I told you in this video intriguing, I 100% recommend you give it a shot. But that's it. I hope this video has been something you enjoyed, or it made you think about stuff and isn't something that's filled you with an intense murderous rage, although I understand that the last one is possible. Other than that, I'll let myself sign this one off.
Tune in next week for more amazing Minecraft at the end! Bye.